This is the worked solution to question 9.2 C10 from the textbook Hummeldinger. And it's an interesting question because basically we could solve it a number of different ways. You borrow $12,000 and you're supposed to pay back $5,000 after 18 months and 4,000 after 30 months, and then a final payment after 5 years. The point is that the interest rate changes halfway through. So after 2 years, it changes from 11% semi-annually to 12% monthly. What we want to know is what was the size of the final payment. Now what we're going to do is to solve it in the way that would be laid out in your bank account. In other words, just follow it chronologically. We could solve it by bringing everything to the interest rate change date, or any other date for that matter, but let's just follow along as if it was in your account book. So E1 here is the $12,000 that you borrowed initially. So that's your initial balance. Then after 18 months, so that's a year and a half, you repay 5,000, so your balance is reduced. Here's the tricky thing, is that after 2 years the interest rate changes. Then we need to calculate your new balance at the date the interest rate changes. At E3 you repay another $4,000. Finally, right at the end, you repay the final amount to clear the loan. So our approach is going to be rolling all the payments along using the future value. We have to do that. We can't bring them all to some focal date at the end in one go because of the interest rate change. So the equation of equivalence is E1, which is your borrowing, must equal your repayments, E2 plus E3, and then E4 is the final amount. So here we go step by step, and you will need to make sure you can get the same things to put into the calculator. So the first thing is you owe $12,000. We need to calculate how much you owe after 18 months. There's the PY is 2, N is 3, because it's 18 months with a PY of 2 makes the N is 3. So at that date you owe 14,090.897. You repay $5,000 on the same day. So by the time you go home for a cup of tea in the evening, your new balance is 90,000.987. Now, 6 months after you've had your cup of tea, the interest rate changes. So we need to calculate your balance at the date the interest rate changes. So that would in effect be 6 months later. Now your new balance on the day the interest rate changes is 950.896. Finally, or one not quite finally, but step E3, you're going to repay another $4,000. So just like we did before, we need to calculate your balance on that day. Now notice that this is at the new interest rate. So on the morning of that day, as you go down to the bank, you owe $10,180. You're repaying $4,000. So by the time you go home in the evening, your balance is 6180.929. Finally, we need to work out your last payment. In other words, what you will need to pay to the bank to totally discharge the debt. This is relatively simple. All it is we put in PV is the 6180.929, which is what you owe. Finally, at the final payment date, which is 2.5 years after E3, we find that your balance will be 8330.958. So the key to this thing is to draw a very clear little diagram of all the time. So I haven't put in all the little 6 months here, 6 months there. I'd like you to do that. Notice that we need to work out the time between the two events very carefully. In some cases it's told in the question, but in others you need to do some subtraction. Thank you.